غفلة من هذا فكشفنا عنك غطاءك فبصرك اليوم حديد صدق الله العظيم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يحل لكم أن ترثوا النساء كرها. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تعلموا الفرائض وعلموها فإنه نصف العلم وهو ينسى وهو أول شيء ينتزع من أمتي، أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. First and foremost, I would like to thank all of you for taking out this time on a gloomy weekend. Instead of curling up on the sofa with the booklet or with a book, we decided to come to the masjid to learn for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First and foremost, I would like to mention that this booklet that's been handed to you, Brother Hamza, if you can make sure the sisters also get it, inshallah. So this booklet, we should include into the book and what we shouldn't. And alhamdulillah, we'll meet later. Jazakallah Khairan, may Allah reward the team of scholars and designers that came up with this booklet. You're definitely going to find some mistakes, so please excuse it, as this is the first and only edition of this booklet. It was literally, it's the handout, notes for what's been gathered here for the sake of this event only. So this is a custom-made booklet that's just put together within the last week, and all the things that we're going to cover is in this booklet. If we can open to the introduction, the first thing that we must understand and we can definitely appreciate is the Islamic rules of inheritance. Before the arrival of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yahillu lakum an tarithu nisaa karha. O believers, and this is something that when Allah mentioned, there was no concept of this prior. It was understood, I worked and I gained all this money and wealth, no one else can take it away from me. So this was the first time any type of introduction was done that no, your wealth has the right of others in it. Before Islam, there was no concept of that. So in the pre-Islamic Arab world, the common practice was just, it was the person whose wealth it was. If he passes away, the strongest person, whoever is able to, establish power through the sword, that's it. Even to the extent that the wife or the wives of that individual will also be part of the inheritance. SubhanAllah. It was one of the most evil practices that you can possibly imagine. It was in that time that where we could say, usually, if you were to summarize abuse, anytime, if you were to summarize abuse, it would be either through law or it would be through culture. And because there was no laws in pre-Islamic Arabia, it was all culture. And the culture was so powerful that literally they will not be able to go against the culture. And subhanAllah, if you look at in today's era, we would realize that some of those practices still exist. And this is the difference where, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us with Iman and Islam. And if we're able to understand truly the values of Iman and Islam, we understand that there is a justice system. And it's completely just. Because any time you'll see that whenever humans try to establish any justice system, you will see what in Arabic they will call ifrat or tafriq, either on one end or the other end. And when you compare the East and the West, even now, in today's day and age, it would be the same. You know, just till 100 years ago, until like 1920s, in Europe, which was considered the most advanced country, the most advanced era, and there was no concept of women inheriting any type of property. They will not be able to own any type of property. This was just 100 years ago. And subhanAllah, Islam 1400 years ago gave right to Muslims to inherit from her husband, from her father, from her brothers, from her sons, all of them. Subhanallah. 1400 years ago. And right now, the most advanced West, until 100 years ago, they did not even have a right. And we know they did not even have rights to vote till recently. And this is something that is ongoing. And now we feel like, oh, Islam is backward. SubhanAllah. Just because you discover something and you didn't even fully discover it properly, now Islam is backward. And Islam established all of these rules in the time of Rasulullah 14 centuries ago. And even if we were to study the difference between the East and the West now, in the East, a lot of the cultures are still dominant in establishing abuse. Many times, there's still people that are depriving the female family members from inheritance. There's still people that are not dividing the inheritance according to Islamic law or any law at all. Right? Not even the law of the country, many times it's just cultural values. And because it's an emotional time, a lot of times these things get left, even in practicing Muslims. And if you look at the West, what is the West? They will say what they call the surviving spouse. So now, whatever happens is just limited to everything will go to a specific person. Unless there is any instructions given by the deceased, you will not be able to divide the inheritance in any other way. It will only be based on what the state defines, and we always know that there is some type of abuse that exists even till now. And inshallah, as we progress through the book, we will realize through our session today that there is so much abuse that can be done, and the only way to eliminate it, as Muslims or non-Muslims, is to make sure that we are able to dictate what happens after our death with our property. If you look at inheritances in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first, He established the system in such a way that first and foremost, there is justice. All the people will have shares according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined. And it's a lot more intricate than just to say, oh, you know, one of the most famous things when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah, يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders you about your children, that the daughters will get, or the sons will get twice as much as the daughters. لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنثَيَيْنِ. That sons will get twice as much as the daughters. So immediately, it would be a question, look at the Islamic justice system. That it's lopsided. The son is getting twice as much as the daughter, or the daughter is getting only half of the son, the shares of the son. And this is a major misconception. And this is something that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He revealed the ayahs of inheritance in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned آباؤكم وأبناؤكم. You know, if we were to just think about it for a little bit, if I was to ask you, if today somebody asked us, who do you consider to be the most caring after you amongst your relatives? Majority of us will say either our fathers or our sons. Most of us. Majority of us will say is either my parents or my sibling, my children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you were to take just your father and your children, آباؤكم وأبناؤكم لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا. You do not know which one will benefit you and your family more after you die. Just between those two relatives. آباؤكم وأبناؤكم لا تدرون أيهم أقرب لكم نفعا. And this is a fact. If we were to look at today and we say, I trust my father the most, or I trust my son the most, after we pass away, we don't know what would be the circumstances in which they will have to make those decisions, and what will be the outcome of those decisions, whether it's going to be benefiting my wife, my children, my siblings, my business, my house, my whatever. Is it going to be beneficial or not? We cannot determine that. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, there is a system that I have set. If you were to follow that, that would be the most just system that you would follow. SubhanAllah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentioned about the father and the children. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established to break the concentration of wealth of few and spread it through equal opportunity. What is this equal opportunity? Well, we have to understand. A lot of times we feel that we have 3 children, but 2 of them, they're not as talented, or they're not as skilled. And one, mashallah, he's a lot more skilled. So now, immediately, if we were to decide, we would say, let's give all this wealth to that one son who has a lot of skills and a lot of opportunity to grow that wealth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no. We do not know who will benefit you more. Imagine this. We have 2 children, and we think that one will do better, but we might be thinking according to the world. We might be thinking that this person, if I give him all my wealth, we would be able to distribute, he would be able to turn one company into 2 and 3 and 4 businesses. And the other one might just go give it to the local masjid. Might give it to the local organization. Just give it all in sadaqah. But then, in the akhirah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let us know that whose investment was better. Subhanallah. We do not know. And this is exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, that no. This is the structured system in which we would have to distribute the wealth, and then those people will decide and they will report to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about how they spent that wealth. And subhanAllah, the system is such, the minute we breathe our last breath, that's the end of it. Immediately, all of the wealth is transferred. Any person who is trying to distribute the wealth, they're merely just as an agent distributing the wealth, but the ownership has already been transferred. And then the last thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to teach us that a man is not an absolute master of his wealth. He's not the absolute owner. And he's just a trustee. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about like Qarun and Fir'aun, these were the giants. If we think about wealth today, we think about like billion, 2 billion, 5 billion, it's a lot. If somebody has 100 billion, it's like the most amount. Honestly, if that 100 billion was probably not even a small percentage of Qarun's wealth and Fir'aun's wealth. And this is the reality. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it does not matter. The reality is that we're just a chain, a link in a long chain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started this chain from the beginning. We collect the wealth, we pass it on to the next one. And the next person and the next person. At the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announces to the world in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And the true inheritance belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's in the earth or in the house. وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And the last thing that I want to mention about Islamic inheritance, which is the most beautiful thing, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established the division of the inheritance laws based on the welfare system. And let me elaborate. If we said that a mother, when she passes away, the sons will get twice as much as the daughter. That was the objection. The sons will get twice as much as the daughter. Why? We're talking about when the mother passes away. When the mother is alive, the sons are twice as much responsible for that mother as the daughter. This is the reality. So why are they getting twice as much? Because they're paying twice as much. So if a mother needs $1,000 to survive for her expenses, now that $1,000 will be divided. Twice as much will be burdened on the son, and 1%, half of that will be on the daughter. So obviously, if you look at it in the world, we might be looking at it in one sense that, oh, it's benefiting the son more when she passes away. When she passes away, she might not even have anything. But throughout the entire time, for maybe 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years, the sons are supporting her, paying twice as much. When she passes away, if she leaves a few $1,000s, it's not even 0.1% of what they have spent over the last X amount of years. SubhanAllah. This is something that we need to understand. And every single system is like this. We don't have too much time to get into a lot of detail, but many of the objections that come on Islam, when you were to go to the bottom of it and you do case-by-case study, you realize that there are so many hidden gems within the Islamic system that you will not even understand. SubhanAllah. And when you do a case-by-case study, that's when we say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But for the last 10 years, we're nodding our heads to everybody else. They're saying, oh, Islam is an injustice system. We said, yeah, this is what it is. But now when we understand, when we truly give time to understand, we realize that, Islam has hidden the entire welfare system inside of their inheritance system. Today, if you look at all the departments, they always have like a welfare system where they would give out things that, okay, we need to take care of the poor. We need to take care of the needy. Millions and millions of dollars are distributed to all the people who are in need. But Islam has it where every single person, if they take care of their immediate inheritors, there will not be any need for the welfare system. So the welfare system is actually hidden inside of the inheritance system. So now when we say, if this person was to pass away, the person who would get half a share, the person who would get 1/6 of a share, or 1/3 of a share, when this person is in need, those people, they would be responsible for whatever is needed, half of the share, or 1/6 of the share, or 1/3 of the share. SubhanAllah. This is how the welfare system is established in Islam. And this is hidden inside of that. Moving on, I don't want to take too much time in this, but basically, Islamic values. So when Rasulullah came, the rules of inheritance were not given to Rasulullah immediately. So initially, there was an ayah of the Quran on page 3, on top. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ إِنْ تَرَكَ خَيْرًا لِلْوَصِيَّةِ لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed for you when death approaches any one of you. If he leaves any wealth, if there's any wealth that person leaves, there must be a will made, a bequest made for the parents and near relatives according to what is acceptable. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it obligatory upon all the believers. As long as you possess some wealth, before you pass away, you have to write a will. And this is what Rasulullah mentioned, that you must have a will written, and you should not go 3 days without the will being written, because you had to write down, when I die, such and such thing is going to take place, my relatives will be getting this much inheritance. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after this, He revealed the ayah. There's 3 ayahs in the Quran. Inshallah, we'll discuss that in the next section of this booklet. يُوصِيكُمُ اللَّهُ فِي أَوْلَادِكُمْ. It's a very lengthy ayah. There's 3 ayahs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed and talks about all the details of that. And then after that, this ayah was abrogated, that now you did not have to sign the will. Because as soon as you pass away, the will is going to be followed in things that you wanted to do, but as far as inheritance, those laws are already written, and those laws are already, your wealth is going to be distributed to your family members according to that. That's already written. And in Islam, when you look at it, whether a person is Muslim or not, the most abuse takes place in this. The number one reason is because we're not familiar with will and inheritance. Majority of us, if we were to just ask, can we talk about, would you be able to explain to me the inheritance laws? They will say, the Shaykh will know, but we're not very comfortable with discussing because we're not familiar with it. To be honest, it is one of the most intricate and complicated arts of our time, and this is something, we're trying to squeeze the book in Asr al-Maghrib, but the reality is, when you go through Islamic seminary and you actually study this in length, there's actually 1 full year that we take this art, that we master it from the beginning of the year all the way. So basically, it's almost like 2 terms in a college level to understand and do the divisions according to the Islamic rules. And then if you're doing an iftar course, becoming mufti, then you have to give another 1 year of that. 1 full year, again, before you get your PhD in fiqh. So twice, so 2 years, 2 full years we actually study this. So it is intricate, I completely understand. But at the same time, sessions like this, every so often, to revive and to realize what is our responsibility. That's the most important thing. We cannot say that, it's so complicated that we're just going to abandon it. It's so complicated that we're just going to wait till somebody passes away, then go to the Shaykh and go to the Imam, and then find out. No, there are certain responsibilities that we need to act upon now. And if we're not doing that, that means that there is something that we are lacking, and if something does not go the way we want, then we are going to be held responsible in the sight of Allah. And inshallah, that's exactly what I wanted to mention before we get into the Islamic rulings of will and inheritance. I wanted to mention importance of will in the West. Now let me start by this, that we talked about, there is importance of will in the East as well. But a lot of times, because we are so afraid to talk about will and inheritance, many times we're not even familiar with the protocols and the procedures of will and inheritance. So what happens, number one, we have to understand, if we pass away and our will is not distributed according to the Shari'i rules, the Islamic rules and regulations, we have to understand in the sight of Allah, we are responsible. We are responsible. And this is why in the Quran, the ayah that we read on the top of the page, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, Kutiba alaykum, it is compulsory upon you. And this is the same Kutiba alaykum that we read every day in Ramadan for fasting. The same thing. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. This is the same kutiba alaykum. It is compulsory upon you to write a will, to write a Wassiyah. So number one, it is our responsibility. So if somebody says, I don't know what my family did after I passed away, it is not acceptable on the side of Allah. We need to take ownership. Number two, the default process if someone passes away in the West is what they call a surviving spouse. Obviously, it might differ from state to state, but from what I know, it is what they call surviving spouse. That means that if a person is passing away, his wife has the full ownership to distribute the wealth according to what she wants. And if the wife passes away, the husband has the full right to distribute wealth the way he wants. This is what they call the surviving spouse. This is by default. The only way that you can counter that is by having a will that would counter that. So immediately, if there is a person that says, okay, this person passed away, but there is a will in place, then obviously by law, legally, you will have to follow that will and that request. Otherwise, no, default is already assigned. And the last thing that I want to mention is the will is designed for more than just distribution of wealth. Many times we feel that, if a person passes away, his wealth needs to be distributed according to the rules of Islam. But the reality is that it's not just the wealth. If a person passes away, there's situations where a person passed away and he was a new Muslim. Now, the family is saying, no, we're going to cremate him. He did not leave any will, we don't know. So now, they're saying, no, in our tradition, we cremate people. Now, There is nothing you can do to tackle that. Because you don't have any legal evidence, you don't have any legal way to prove that, no, that person who passed away would have wanted something differently. It's possible. Similarly, if husband and wife are traveling together, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all, but if husband and wife both pass away, there is no will in place, what happens with the children? If the children are underage, all the children become the property of the state until we could see the next kin, the next legal guardian of those children. But what happens in the meantime, that court process, because they'll assign an attorney to the children, they'll assign attorneys to everybody else in this case, but in the meantime, the entire time, the children are going to be in foster care. And that's another dilemma that our community deals with, that we don't even have enough Muslim foster care. If today an issue was to arise and we were to say, oh, these kids need to be placed into foster care, we don't even have enough Muslim families signing up and taking the training for becoming foster homes. We don't even have that. That's another discussion for another time, but that's another thing. So now what happens with these children? They're living with another family. They could be Christian, they could be atheist, they could be whatever. Now they're being fed, whatever. So all your life you make sure that only halal morsel of food went into the mouths of our children, and tomorrow it could all be taken away. Just because we lack to write something down in our book. So it's a lot deeper than that. And I can go on and on about subhanahu wa ta'ala, we walked them through the light of Iman. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses mayyat for spiritually being dead or also actually being dead. So mayyat actually means deceased. Taraka actually means the wall left behind by the mayyat, by the person, by the deceased, that is owed to anyone. Tarika includes any debts owed to the mayyat as well. So tarika has two folds. Anything that the deceased owes to others, or others owe to him or her. So it means both things. So tarika means the total assets left behind by the deceased. That's what tarika means. So whoever is assigned, and there's a lot of other terminologies that gets into like who's going to be the agent that is responsible for collecting all of this, which is called the Wassiyah. The person who is going to gather all of this wealth and make sure that all the wealth is gathered, all the assets are gathered before distribution. So tarika actually means that the total assets left behind by the deceased. Tajheez wa takfeen. Tajheez literally means to prepare the dead, any type of funeral expenses. Takfeen means to put him in a coffin or shroud. So one is funeral expenses, one is burial expenses. Okay? So again, funeral expenses are different because now the body needs to be released from either the hospital, the nursing home, or wherever, transported into the funeral home. There's charges for that. There is, whatever charges accumulate and all of that. Then there's charges for burial, whichever cemetery that we go to, and then obviously whatever arrangements that need to be made. So tajheez wa takfeen is twofold. One is the funeral expenses, and one is the burial expenses. And those all come out from the tarika, which is the assets that was left behind from the deceased. Number 4, dain. Dain means debt. Any type of debt that others owe to the deceased or the deceased owes to others. Any type of debt to be collected or to be paid. And this includes short-term and long-term debt. Inshallah, we'll talk about that in this section. Wassiyah wa Wirathah. It's two separate things. Wassiyah in Islam is will or bequest. And Wirathah is actual inheritance. So will is different than inheritance. Inshallah, we'll talk about that as well. Wirathah are the actual inheritors. Those people, and inshallah we'll go into a little bit of details about it in the next part. Wirathah is of two types. As you can see, the last two things, one is Zawil Furud, one is Asabah. So those Wirathah, those inheritors who actually deserve any portion in our wealth when we pass away, there are two types. One is called Zawil Furud. Fard in the Arabic language means a specific amount. That's what fard means. That's why when you say fara'id, we know that, okay, there's 2 fara'id for Fajr, 4 for Dhuhr, 4 for Asr, because it's a specific amount. So that's why it's called farad. So Dhawi al-Furud are those relatives which are assigned in the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they have specific shares. Asaba, they don't have specific shares. The last one, those people, they get the leftover inheritance from Dhawi al-Furud. So now when we have this entire amount of inheritance to be distributed, we will distribute it to all the Dhawi al-Furud. And we'll talk about those portions, inshallah. We'll try our best to try to cover it as best as we can. All the Dhawi al-Furud will get their portions, and after they're getting their portions, they will actually be able to give it to the asaba if there's any wealth left over. Okay? Now, I would like to do the next part in a little bit of an interactive section, the section to be interactive a little bit, just so that any questions that we have, feel free to ask those questions as we go. Because a lot of this, the first part of it was just like the introduction part, but the actual Islamic part, I want to be able to have those questions answered as we go. Are there any questions now so far from what we talked about? So initially we talked about what was the rules and regulations in Ayyam al-Jahiliyyah, and for some European countries, the Jahiliyyah kind of carried on all the way till recent times, and that continues because culture and certain rules and regulations continue the abuse of inheritance. And then we talked about inheritance in Islam. And then in Islam, all the different things that we talked that we have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set up one of the most beautiful systems of inheritance, and put the inheritance, the actual welfare system within the inheritance system. And then we talked about having the importance of having a will written down for us now in this day and age, just so that there is justice served after we pass away and there is no misunderstandings after that. And inshallah we'll go into a little bit of details about how the inheritance works, what is the difference between will and inheritance, how are the different types of inheritance and the relatives they are. Inshallah that's going to be in the next one. Are there any?
So you said that the Western society plays a big role on how we write our wills, right? That's what you said. That's what you said.
But basically, the Western society has their laws laid out for inheritance, and we can counter that by having the will. If you don't have a will, then they're going to exercise what is the law. But if we have a will written, then they will exercise that.
Are you going to talk about what? Are you going to talk about?
Yes, that's the next one.
Are you going to talk about like Muslim countries?
Yes, all the different types of wills that are going to be in place, we're going to talk about. Any other questions before we move on? Because that was the introduction part. Now, inshallah, we'll get into the will and inheritance. So the first thing on page 6, difference between Wassiyah and Wirathah. These are two words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Quran. They are almost synonyms, but at the same time, they are completely different. So Wassiyah, we translate it as will or bequest. And inheritance is, Wirathah is actual inheritance. So Wassiyah is a will or bequest, or the instruction a person leaves for his money according to his own wishes and preferences. So what I can say is, when I pass away, I would like $5,000 to be given to such and such masjid. I would like $10,000 given to such and such school. I would like $50,000 given to that project and that project. And I would like this person to do this. Whatever we want, whatever we write in that will, that is according to my wishes. There are certain rules of the will. Inshallah, that's in the next portion. And whatever we write, that's called Wassiyah. The second part is inheritance. Inheritance means that whatever the rules that are assigned by Sharia, that would be assigned. Whatever the Islamic values are. So if Sharia says, when we pass away, our wives get a specific amount, that would be the amount that you can write all the will you want, that amount will not be changed. Similarly, if we say, I want my father to get this, or I want my eldest son to get this, all those wills are not valid. Because inheritance is already fixed by Sharia. Will is not. So now the question comes, okay, so how do you tackle the difference? What's the difference? If you're writing a will, when is it valid, when is not valid? Right? Because you can write a will and so it's almost like it's conflict, right? Because it's like you wrote a set of will that I would like my wealth distributed in this fashion. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us instructions that your inheritance would have to be followed in this fashion. So now there's a conflict. So how do we resolve that conflict? That's the next part, which is basically conditions for a wassiyah, for a will to be valid. Number one is that this can only be spent from 1/3 of the deceased wealth. That's the number one condition. So all the wants that you want, all the wishes that you want, can only be distributed from 1/3 of the total assets. So if somebody is leaving behind $99,000, you can only write in your will up to $33,000, and that's it. If it's anything more than $33,000, it will not be valid. That's the number one condition. That you can only make a will according to up to 1/3 of the total amount. If it's less than 1/3, alhamdulillah. So if somebody says, when I pass away, I want 10,000 to go to the masjid. Perfect, no problem. If somebody says, when I pass away, I want my cars to be donated to the local school. Alhamdulillah. If that's less than 33,000, alhamdulillah. If it's more than that, then it's different. It cannot be more than that. It has to be less than 1/3 of that. So number one condition is that it has to be less than 1/3. The question comes, what happens if it's more than 1/3? It's a simple rule. We will go back to the inheritors because that's their right. So now, for example, I write, when I pass away, I would like my house to be donated to this poor family. Now my house is worth half of my inheritance. Now they will go to my family and say, okay, you're the wife, you're the child, you're the mother, you're the father, whatever it is, and they'll say, this is what's in the will. Now he's going over. Just say if my amount is half, and the only amount that I can give is 1/3. So just say I leave behind the house is worth 50,000. So we say, look, he is going over by 17,000 or so. So we say, are you guys okay with that? You say, if they say yes, then we'll process it. If they say no, then we'll say no. We cannot do that. We'll sell the house, and then 33,000 will go to that family, and the 17,000 will go to the inheritance. Is that clear? So anything more than 1/3 will not be valid unless the permission is taken from the Wirathah, from the inheritors. Okay? Inshallah. Now, the second condition. A will cannot be for any inheritor who is already receiving a share. So obviously, you cannot, mess with the system, because the system is there that my son will get this amount, my daughter will get this amount, my brother will get this amount, my father will get this amount. All these shares are already assigned. All these shares are already assigned. So if you're trying to give more to one person, if that person is already inheriting something, you're not allowed to give it to that person. Does that make sense? So you're not allowed to give it to any inheritor, and if you give it to a non-inheritor, it cannot be more than 1/3. That's the two rules. That's the first two rules. That, number one, it has to be less than 1/3. Number two, it has to be given to someone other than the inheritor. Okay? Any questions? Okay. Number three, a will cannot be made for a sin or anything against Islamic values. Anything against Islamic values or anything sinful. So for example, if a person says, when I pass away, I would like this much money to be given to this specific haram, whether it's like a club or something else that does not have any good value, then we will not execute that will. You're not allowed to have anything that is sinful or anything against the Sharia. Okay? So basically, there's only three conditions. Now, one of the questions that is commonly asked is about, what about if a person had some fast that he needed to make up, or he didn't do his Hajj in his lifetime, or any of those? Remember, you can write a will. You can write a will to have those things fulfilled. For example, if a person says, I would like somebody to do a Hajj on my behalf, or I owed this much money in zakah, or any of that, I would like this much to be given. The reality is, if it's within the 1/3, we will validate it. And if it's more than 1/3, so this person says, I never did Hajj in my life, I passed away, well, I was too busy in my business and my this and that, and now I would like somebody to do Hajj. when we looked at it, this person only left behind $25,000 and height was $15,000. Then we'll say, we're sorry. We won't be able to do it. We can try to get somebody to do it within that amount. Just say, for example, if you left behind 33,000, we'll say, okay, we'll try to get somebody to do it within the 11,000. But if it's not possible, let's say if it's only 3,300, it doesn't matter where you're doing it from. It would be very, very difficult to try to do it within $1,000, $1,100. If it's not possible, then the inheritors do not have to abide by that will. Everyone understand? So this is something that we need to make sure is done in our lifetime, or we need to leave behind enough wealth that is part of that 1/3. Otherwise, they do not have to honor that will if it's more than 1/3 according to Sharia. Does that make sense? Now, if we move to page number 7. Before we move on to the actual order of distribution, I wanted to mention the reason why we have these type of workshops and these type of gatherings is because we want to understand that even though, Islamically speaking, even though all of the rules of inheritance is already fixed, but if we don't have a will in place that is going to mention that those laws have to be abided by after our life, after we pass away, then nobody is going to be forced legally to abide by them. Does that make sense? So for example, when we're writing our will, we have the right up to 1/3 to distribute it wherever we want. But in the West, we also have to write a will saying that I would like my inheritance to be distributed according to the Islamic way, according to the Islamic standards. And if we don't write that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. But if our surviving spouse or another male member of the family, another person who's inheriting this wealth, comes and says, no, I think, I have the right to this, I deserve all of this, we cannot say anything. We cannot say anything. And this has happened many times. Normally, in our culture, what happens? We have a father, we have an older brother who is constantly helping the father grow the business and grow the practice or whatever they're into, and they're becoming successful. Now, the older brother or the older two brothers or the male members of the family, they're always helping. And what happens with the daughters? They get married, they move on with their life, and they're not really around. So now when this father, in his 40s and 50s and 60s, he built a multi-million-dollar practice, multi-million-dollar business, and now all this millions of dollars is floating around, the sons will feel what? Why would we have to even give half to our sisters? They didn't do anything. So immediately, the sons will say, no, this is all ours. Where the reality is, the sons were there to help the father grow the business. Whose business is it? In the person's lifetime, if he distributed the business to the brothers, alhamdulillah, that's fine. That's acceptable on the side of Allah. But till the end, if the father said, this is my business, my blood and sweat went into this, majority of the time, it is against their ego to ever say that this is somebody else's business. This is my business. And they die saying that. If that's his business, then those daughters deserve the right, just the way the sons deserve the right. And when we don't exercise our will according to that, and if the sons come and say, no, it's very clearly understood that we inherit the right to this business and we should take all of it. We're not going to divide our business and our household with our sister. There's 6 of them. Right? And we say, no, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divided the shares according to that, and we have to honor that. If you really felt that way where the business belongs to your sons, do it in your lifetime. If not, then make sure you write a will that is according to the Islamic standards. Otherwise, we go into the grave, we're not even getting a penny. We're not even getting one morsel of that business in our grave. Nothing. And yet, we're getting all the burden of it. So we need to make sure that the rules are clear, our will is clear, that look, whatever happens, my wealth is going to be distributed according to Islamic inheritance laws. And we have to exercise that. Because, many times we underestimate. The brothers, a lot of times they're filled with ego too. So, we did this. You're out there, when you come home, your sisters are going to be the one feeding you and growing your belly for those 40 years that you worked as well. In reality, they work just as hard. Just because you worked in the business and they worked at home, or they worked in a place where you couldn't see their effort, it does not mean that they don't have the right to that business, or they don't have the right to that work. You understand? It's a complete family system. And we have to understand that. And that is a reality. So we have to understand that if we are not going to follow this, we are going to be held responsible in the sight of Allah. And I can give you 30 examples of where there was abuse in inheritance. And that's not something uncommon. If you talk to your distant family member, you would realize that in some fashion, in some way, they have been abused. And a lot of times, women, they don't fight. Our sisters don't fight. Our distant brothers, they don't fight. They just say, okay, it's okay. It's fine. Whatever happens, happens. It's okay. It's okay. It's like, they just move on. The reality, whether they forgive it or not, that's a separate thing. It's their right, and it's already in their name. It's already their ownership. And if we're not following that, then it is our responsibility whether we are living or not. Are we understanding that? Inshallah. Any questions? Yeah. If we are trying to leave any will that is against the rules and regulations of the inheritance laws, it's not going to be acceptable. So not having children is not an acceptable excuse to change the rules that are already been assigned by Sharia. So we have to always abide by that. If there is no kids, there was a hadith of Jabir radiallahu anhu when he did not have any children. And when he was really sick, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed an ayah specifically about not having children and not having any parents. It will go to the sibling. We cannot tackle that because that is something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that would not be acceptable. Yes.
So after we write the will, how do we put it into place? Or how do we make sure it's certified and that they're going to read it and accept it?
Yeah, inshallah, we have that coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, inshallah, we have that coming up. Any other questions in regards to the will itself? Who else? Any questions? Go ahead.
About inheritance. What if there's a child that's like special needs, so they can't use the money, they have someone taking care of them? Are they considered, they get a share,
Yeah.
and it goes to the caretaker, or is it?
That's a good question. I'll repeat the question. So one of the questions is that what if there's a special needs or a special care child or even an adult, but they are in need of somebody else? Yes. The Sharia, what they say is that they will the person who is the guardian or the parent of that will take that share according to the share that they're eligible for, and they will spend it on them according to their needs. So it would be assigned by Sharia to take that.
Second question. What about like a family that's supposed to get inheritance, but they kind of like they're cut off from the family?
It doesn't matter.
You have to like reach out to them, find them, get them their inheritance.
Yes. So the way, as I mentioned earlier, the way inheritance works, if today I pass away right now, all of everything that I own, it's not even waiting for us to divide it according to that. It's already divided. So meaning that the transfer of ownership does not need any additional steps. So whether they're cut off or not, whether any family member is cut off or they're distant or they're nowhere to be found, their share must be given to them. If it's not given to them right away, it needs to be saved for them till we can reach them and give it to them, but it has to be given. If they abandon it, they say, no, just put it back into the tariqah, the total, then that's something they're signing back to us. But in the beginning, when we distribute it, it would be there. We would have to go, they already own it. It would be as if they need to take an additional step to bring it back to the tariqah, to the total assets. So it's not like, we couldn't find them, so we didn't give it to them. No, it's already theirs. You need to find them to take it back, if anything. So if the person says, okay, I don't want it, I don't want anything to do with it, or give it back into the total, then that's it. But otherwise, it will be that you will have to make sure that you find that person and give it to them. If you can't find the person and it's difficult to reach them, you would have to take their portion, even if it's like selling off the assets and saving it somewhere. You would have to save it until that person is given to that person, or that person is given back to somebody else. Good.
Brothers and sisters who marry, can their spouses inherit or not inherit?
Anytime there is a difference in religion, there is no inheritance. And inshallah, that's coming, inshallah, in the next page that we're going to do. We'll talk about the inheritance. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, for example, one person, he has 2 sons and 2 daughters. And he didn't do any will. So now by law or by Sharia, then it is all their kids. But the son, so they are not willing to give the share to their sisters. So in that case, will that person be responsible, or
The person who passed away will be responsible. Anytime because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the hadiths that we read, I don't think I translated it, but if you look at, it's a hadith in Ibn Majah on page 3, one of the things that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, تَعَلِّمُوا الْفَرَائِضَ وَعَلِّمُوهَا, that teach and learn inheritance. Learn it, learn about it, and teach it. And this is a tradition that needs to continue. Why? فَإِنَّهُ نِصْفُ الْعِلْمِ. This is almost half of ilm. And وَهُوَ يُنْسَى. And this would be forgotten because it's too difficult. And وَهُوَ أَوَّلُ شَيْءٍ يُنْتَزَعُ مِنْ أُمَّتِي. And this is something that would be one of the first things to disappear from my ummah. So we need to make sure, this is why I keep emphasizing, and brothers are here who are going to inshallah conduct another section of this, another session on the legal aspect of it, because this is something that we need to make it. Inshallah, I'll go into a little bit of details about how we can try to make it as easy as possible. And inshallah, the legal documents are coming. So I wanted to mention that because it's something that we have to make sure. And you can blame them. They are going to get the sin. If they're not distributing the wealth according to Islam, they will get the sin as well. But a piece of that pie is also our responsibility. We need to make sure that we are fulfilling the responsibility, and it's not only on them. And a lot of times, it's just ignorance. Like, they don't even know what is the right thing. And I gave you an example. The brothers are like, we worked in this factory for 40 years, 50 years. Our sister didn't do nothing. And this is something that's ongoing. And a lot of husbands will say that about the wife. The wife will say that about the husband who's just sitting on the sofa. I was out working every single day building my practice. He doesn't get anything. My son should get it, or some other people should get it. He shouldn't get anything. And this is the ongoing dilemma. In all different family dynamics, there will be all different types of situations.
As far as fidya for the deceased means expenses. So we know from last night we elaborate also fidya.
So fidya, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentioned in the Quran, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخْرَى. Right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he made the fidya, the sawm of the fasting, fard. But if you're not able to fast because of sickness or traveling, you have to make it up. But if you're not able to make it up because of old age, because of a terminating illness, or some other reason you're not able to make it up, you're allowed to give فَفِدْيَةٌ مِنْ صِيَامٍ أَوْ صَدَقَةٍ. So you're allowed to make fidya. And if that fidya is equal to one portion of sadaqat al-fitr, approximately, what needs to be given for each time. And if you're not giving it in your lifetime, you can prescribe it in your will, but again, it has to be within the 1/3. That's why it's best to just give it as you think. So for example, there's some people who go through bypass surgery, towards the end of their lifetime. They don't know if they're going to be able to make up their fast, because they don't have much time left. They're in their 60s or 70s or sometimes even beyond that. Now, if you're missing your fast every day, every Ramadan, just give whatever money that you have. Just make sure you take care of that portion. So that way there's nothing lingering on. But if there is something lingering on, then you need to make sure that you write that in your will. Is that answer? Salah is the same thing as Sawm. So the same thing for each Sawm. He will need to change it because he did something against the rules of Sharia. So it's just like as if now that will is not executed, but when it does get executed, he's going to be sinful for it. It's just like somebody any other will or any other order that he gives according to Sharia, like for example, if a person says, when I pass away, I would like to be cremated, he's going to get sin for that if somebody does end up exercising that. We'll try our best talking to the family members that they don't exercise that will. But remember, if there is an actual will, that's legal power. There's nothing we could do to tackle that. So if that person, the wife or the son says, no, this is what my father wanted, this is what's going to happen, we can't do anything. And he would be self-employed. Okay, inshallah. Let's continue. The order of distribution. So when a person passes away, on page 7, first the estate of the deceased will be used for funeral expenses. And as I talked about before, tajheez wa takfeen. There's 2 steps to this. One is the funeral expenses and then the burial expenses. And they're 2 separate expenses. So the first thing, the deceased himself or herself is responsible for tajheez wa takfeen. If somebody does it, alhamdulillah. But if nobody's there to do it, or somebody does, or everybody chooses not to do it, it will come out of the tariqah. That's the first thing. So if somebody passes away and they leave only $1,000, $2,000 behind, all the burial and funeral expenses will come out of that. And then it will go to the second part, which is clearing all debts. All the debts. It could be long-term debts, short-term debts. It could be debt that, it could be in payments and whatnot, but it needs to be paid right away now because there's no more payments. You need to, because even legally, that person is not responsible anymore, so we need to clear all the debts. If those debts are not clear, then we cannot go to the actual third and fourth part. So the first thing, without clearing the debt, we will pay off the tajheez wa takfeen, which is the burial and funeral expenses, and after that, we'll try to clear out all the debt. There was a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that a person was presented. One of the sahabi, he was presented, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, did he leave any debt? They said, no, Ya Rasulullah, he prayed the Salatul Janazah. A second person came and said, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned, he said, did he leave any debt? He said, yes, Ya Rasulullah, he has some debt. He said, did you leave any wealth behind that we can pay off that debt? He said, yes. So he said, is it going to suffice? He said, yes. He prayed on it. Third one came, and he said, does he have any debt? He said, yes, Ya Rasulullah. He said, did you leave any wealth behind that's going to pay off the debt? He said, no, Ya Rasulullah. He said, you guys go pray, I'm not praying. He wanted to declare the importance of paying off our debt. Many times we have debt and we feel that, we can pay it off. It's okay, the person doesn't need it, he's a millionaire, he's a billionaire, or he's well off, or he's this, or he's my relative, I know his condition, whatever the case may be. The reality is that we need to write this down somewhere, write it in our will that I owe this person this much, because at the end of the day, if the person left, like if we leave any debt behind and we don't pay it off, then every single time that person, if he doesn't come and mention it, we're held responsible every time we leave any debt behind. So the debt is something that is going to be taken care of without even getting into the third part. Now, what is the third part? So after the burial is done, the first thing we do is, does he have any debt? Is his car paid off? Is the house paid off? Is the business paid off? Does he owe anyone any type of money? All of that. We'll announce it. As you hear the imams always mentioning, brothers, if you have any debt, please, the son is here, the father is here, or somebody else is here. Please let us know, let the imam know. We'll circulate it around because we don't want that person, if he forgot to mention it, he will make sure that that's enough. Once the debt is all settled, then the third thing we'll see, did he have any will? And remember, this will is different than the will that we will write, because this will is the Wassiyah, that is Islamically Wassiyah, is how would you like that 1/3 to be distributed? Did you have any wishes, like, maybe you're close to a school or a masjid, maybe you're close to a certain effort, like it could just be, helping the refugees, or helping some country back home, or anything else. Any of those, if they're not, if there is not a will, then we can move on to part 4. But if there is a will, then we would have to execute that will. Then we'll go into the details of it. Is it up to 1/3? Is it more than 1/3? Is it less than 1/3? Is it something sinful? Is it not? All of those details will be ironed out. And then we'll exercise that. So he said, look, all he wrote in his will, that before the inheritance, I would like my car be donated to the local masjid. Okay, we'll say, okay, the car is $5,000. It's much less than 1/3. That's it. We'll put this away. If you said $5,000 to this person, then that's it. We'll give that away, and that's it. We don't have to. And we already talked about the conditions of that will to be valid. And if you met those validation, then we will execute it. And if not, then we will discard it. Then we'll go to the fourth part, which is all the inheritors will receive it. Then we'll go to the fourth part, inshallah. So again, any person who passes away, number one, we'll do the burial and funeral expenses. Then we'll clear all the debts, short-term and long-term debts, because the person's not alive. So we have to clear it right away. And if we need to sell any assets to clear those debts, we'll also do that. Okay, so we'll clear out. So for example, his house is not paid off. Now he owes, $200,000 on his house. The house, whatever he paid off, we'll sell it. So that way nobody has to. So that debt is not outstanding. We'll just have to. Yeah, if somebody wants to refinance it from the family, somebody wants to buy it from the family for whatever reason, that's all up to it. But we will have to clear all the debts. Number three, we'll see if there's any will. If that will is in place, we would follow that. If the will is not in place, then we will start the distribution process. Any questions?
Assuming somebody wants to donate the full third to donation to charity, but they don't know the total amount of their wealth, is it sufficient to just state in the will, I want 1/3 of whatever total to go to so-and-so?
Yes.
Or must you specify that?
Yes. So basically, the question is that when you say, I would like 1/3 of my wealth to be distributed to such and such organization or the masjid or school, then a lot of times you don't know the total amount. And the total amount is always going to be different every night. Like our lunch will officially determine our assets, right? So in reality, it's going to change. So you can never, that's why it's better to do a percentage. So when he did a percentage, then after everything is sorted out, then we'll say whatever the total is, he would like that 1/3 to be donated to such and such place. So then we'll calculate it at that time. Any other questions? Okay, so inshallah we'll move on. So reasons for loss of right to inherit. So obviously the inheritance laws are there, and we're going to start the inheritance process. But the first thing is that there are two reasons. Actually, there's like a set of like 7, 8 reasons. I only chose 2 to be in the book because the rest of them were not really practical, like slavery or difference of certain countries and those type of things that were not really practical. So I just mentioned 2 of them here, and even the first one is a little bit in the gray area, which is if one purposely or accidentally kills the one, they would inherit from. They would not receive anything. We know about those crazy novels of like how a person has like a crazy life insurance policy and then there's like some type of conflict. So regardless, if there is any type of if there is any type of conflict in which this person is actually accused of killing someone, one of the inheritors, that person who is a murder suspect of that will not inherit anything from that. So this is just a simple rule. I think that's also the case in the Western law, that if any person kills somebody, they would be excluded from the life insurance policy or the inheritance because they have something to do with that person's death. So that's number one. Again, that's something a little bit just has to be mentioned, something that has to be discussed, not usually a typical case. The second thing, which is a little bit more practical, is having different religions. So any person with a different religion, a person becomes a Muslim, the entire family is non-Muslim, or a person, then the second thing I mentioned was a Muslim does not inherit from non-Muslim, and vice versa, and also Ridda. Ridda is irtidad, which is turning away from Islam. So a person was a Muslim, and now this person is no longer a Muslim. So now, this person, nobody will inherit from this person, and this person will not inherit from anyone else. Okay, so Ridda, irtidad, is also part of kufr. So a person who turned away from Islam, now he passes away, he has $1 million, nobody can take it from him, and he cannot take it from someone else. So if that happens may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all, but if that happens between a father and a son, or a husband and a wife, they will not inherit from each other, because kufr is one of the conditions that deprive the other party from wirathah. Does that make sense? So, and then obviously sometimes what happens is a few members of the family are Muslim and the rest of them are not. So for example, a person becomes a Muslim and now 1 or 2 other people become Muslim. Okay, so those Muslims will inherit from each other. But the rest of the family is not, the rest of the family will not. And they will not, these 3, 4 people will not inherit from the non-Muslims either. Unless that's part of their rules that they would like to give or something that's different, but they will not organically inherit from those non-Muslims. Does that understand?
What about revert brothers and sisters who have parents who are not
basically, a Muslim inheriting from non-Muslim will be based on the religious rules of whatever the parents and those people are. So if they're allowed to give it to us, then it will be more like a gift. It's not inheritance in that sense. It's like, okay, we don't have anybody to give this money to, so therefore, since you're living, we'll just give it to you. So it's not really inheritance. It's just like whatever you want to call it, like a backup plan or a damage control type of mode. But it's not really inheritance because you're not inheriting that because of the difference of religion. Any other questions? Yes.
So, what did you mean when you said you're not inheriting that because of the different religions? So that means that there's more to inheritance than what I'm thinking about. Because I thought that inheritance was just like somebody dies and you get money. So inheritance is in a way religious. Is that what you're saying?
No. So inheritance means that when a person passes away, you are eligible. It's your right to already inherit that amount by default. There is a second option that for some reason, if that person who is supposed to inherit is not there, then it goes to the next person, to the next person, to the next person until they find it. Sometimes it ends up being state property because there's nobody there. So in reality, you didn't inherit that. It was given to you because there's nobody else to take it. So the state said, okay, because you're the living blood relative, then they will give it to you. Okay?
Yeah, Jazakallah.
Well, inshallah. So let's move on as we're running a little bit short on time. So inshallah, I wanted to discuss this part in detail because it is something really important. Now, if you look at it in Quran, subhanAllah is one of the miracles of the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed 3 ayahs in the Quran only. Only 3 ayahs in the Quran that summarizes the entire inheritance laws. Only 3 ayahs. And subhanAllah, if you talk to any hafiz, without any discussion, you talk to a hafiz and you ask him, what is the most difficult ayahs of the Quran? He will guarantee he will tell you these ayahs. Subhanallah. The most difficult ayahs to memorize, not even translate, just to memorize. Then if you ask any alim and any scholar, and you tell him what is the most difficult art, he will tell you that this is the most difficult art in Islam. And subhanallah, it is something that everything in Islam is oversimplified. But if you look at it 1400 years ago, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed 3 ayahs of the Quran. And I specifically mentioned those 3 ayahs so you can have it with you. Only 3 ayahs, it exhausted people from that time to now. We talk about who created algebra, or we do this, we do that. We studied this art for 2 full years. Becoming a mufti, you study for 2 full years. One in your master's program, and once you study in PhD program for 2 full years, 3 ayahs. Subhanallah. You studied 3 ayahs for 2 full years. This is the depth of Islam. Subhanallah. And it's so technical, and we'll get into that in a little bit, that it's so technical that it's mind-blowing. And this is the beauty of the depth of Islam. And I would leave for you to, inshallah, read these. It's really, really interesting, and subhanAllah, it's so difficult that some of the Darul Iftas, who are responsible for answering the question, they say that if you ask a question of Wirathah, we're going to charge you to do it because it takes so long to do it. Obviously, it's not something to say that if you mess up. So sometimes they actually tell you, we'll answer it the first time. But if you change anything wrong, you forgot a brother because he lives in England, then they're going to charge you for rewriting that because it's so detailed. So it's something for us to understand. And I just want to talk about, if you look at the terminology page on page 5, do you remember we read Dhawi Furud and Asabat? Dhawi Furud and Asabat. We talked about 2 types of relatives. Dhawi Furud, Fard was like those shares that are specific, right? So those are Dhawi Furud. So those Dhawi Furud are specific shares mentioned in these 3 ayahs. Okay? And Asaba is those shares that are not mentioned, but they are also part of the inheritance. Okay? So now when you look at Dhawi Furud and Asaba are fixed shares and non-fixed shares. So like for example, if you look at the first chart where it says like 1/6 and Asaba, and then it says only Asaba. These are things that are, I'm not going to get into the details of it, because honestly, it's something that we would need a 2-day seminar to understand all of this. And it is one of the most interesting seminars, inshallah, we can discuss that in the future about having one of those. But this is something, these are all the inheritance. But before we complete, I want to mention, if you were to take a circle, what I like to call, and when I teach the fiqh of marriage, and I teach like any of those where we want to understand our family circle, look at it this way. What we call a'la wa asfal. A'la wa asfal is those that are going upwards, like our fathers, our uncles, our grandparents, our granduncles. Those are going upwards. Then there's asfal. Safala in Arabic means to go downward, which is our children, our nephews and nieces, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren. That's asfal. And then there is like a chart that goes sideways, which is our spouses, our brothers, our sisters. These go sideways. So you can draw out a circle and kind of understand that things go upwards, they go downwards, they go sideways, and they kind of go a little bit sideways as well. The uncles and the aunts, and then you have paternal and maternal aunts, then you have paternal and maternal nephews, and this is the family circle. And if you look at father and grandfather going upwards, then you have husband and wife going sideways, then you have full daughter, granddaughter going downwards, mom and grandmother going upwards, then you have full sister, half sisters that are going sideways. So they're within that circle, and I don't want to complicate things, but pretty much this is the circle on which you will inherit. Okay? Now, inshallah, we have a few minutes left. I just want to mention, I was not aware that there's going to be a follow-up session on this for the legal side. And alhamdulillah, I felt relieved when we have brothers present here who are notary public. They actually do this. They actually have these type of documents ready for them, for all of us to utilize. And inshallah, we want to continue promoting it. One thing that I would like to mention, I included this because you will have this booklet at home, and it will be a constant reminder for you that you need to do this. And again, there are 3 documents. This is something that we prepared a long time ago. And again, I just included it just for your awareness. It does not have any type of legal status. It does not have any legal value. We can contact the lawyers and the brothers who are working on this actively to be able to exercise this. But the first one is which is called the testation clause, saying that I actually wrote this will. The second one is like the actual self-proving affidavit, saying that yes, this is by law. Somebody will be able to execute this after I pass away because it was signed in the presence of witnesses and it was signed in front of a notary public, so on and so forth. It is stamped, and then after that is the actual will. And the will would be pretty much based on what we have established here. One thing I would like to mention before we conclude here is that when we're writing our will, remember, a lot of times that happens is that we don't know who's going to pass away first, right? Like today, I have certain family members living. I don't know which one will pass away first. So one of the frustrating things that usually happen with writing a will is that they will say, oh, we wrote the will 6 years ago because we went to an ICNA convention and they had it here, so we wrote it. Alhamdulillah, you wrote it. But what happens is, you don't know who's going to pass away first. Because you wrote it based on if I die first. But what if I don't pass away first? So you would have to come up, if you have 6 members in the family, you'd have to come up with 6 different scenarios. And then you came up with when this person was alive. But what if that person passed away? Now you have to rewrite 6 wills. So what I normally recommend, and this is something that inshallah you can confirm with the local scholars and the local imams about how to proceed. What I normally recommend is just have a will stating that I would like this and this and this to be the protocol when I pass away. And this is something that I wrote. Right? This is something that I wrote, and this is something that I want to make sure that this is exercised. You want to help me? Do that? Okay. We'll take it up a minute.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
So inshallah we'll conclude with this that so inshallah I just wanted to conclude with this. That inshallah these booklets were made, again there might be some minor mistakes in here, please excuse that, but these booklets were made as handout notes that you can go home and you will have this with you. And again, the main thing that I wanted to emphasize was that if we could have a will saying that I wrote this will, have it somehow documented with notary public that says that it does have legal status to it. And the one thing that I normally mention is choose 3 to 5 organizations that you trust with your life. Okay? 3 to 5 organizations, and say, I trust these 5 in this order to distribute my wealth according to the inheritance laws of Islam. And if you just write that in your will, what it does is that when whoever passes away, and if all 6 of us from our family member have this will written in that same fashion, what would happen is whoever passes away first, you don't have to rewrite 6 wills again. Because that person, his will will be exercised saying, okay, go to such and such organization or such and such website, and we will calculate that Wirathah according to you, and then it will just repeat after the next one, after the next one. So all they will ask you is, when you pass away, they'll ask your family members, please write down all the family members that are alive right now, and they will distribute the wealth according to that, and just give you a piece of paper saying, according to our Dawah Liftah, this is the shares that is going to be distributed. That this person gets this person gets this, this person gets this, and they will just give it to you. And once you have that, then now you can take all the wealth, calculate it, appraise it, know that this is the wealth, and this is how it's going to be distributed, and you can come up with the final number, and it will be according to that. And then a lot of times, when things are done according to Islamic rules and regulations, the family will be very understanding that, okay, look, this house is worth this much, the business is worth this much, the cars are worth this much, this is this, and we will distribute according to that. You all take this, you take this, we're going to sell this, and however it is, and it will be very easy to divide. So the one thing that I would mention, inshallah, there's going to be, from what I understood, inshallah, Brother Hamza can confirm, that there's going to be a legal session that is going to follow up in the upcoming weeks or so. Then, inshallah, we will, you can ask the legal questions to the brother. From the Islamic side, I have felt the most productive way to do it was that you write that, okay, certain people are responsible for my will. I trust them, so therefore those institutions or organizations will be the ones handling my Wirathah and my inheritance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to leave this world in a fashion that it is pleasing to Allah, and make sure that we don't leave any loose strings after we pass away. Inshallah. Inshallah, I think the scholars will be here after Salah if there's any questions. Inshallah.